Alright, pretty much as I said, human, I was going to do a respond video, and I wrote down all of your main points and some extra thoughts that are worth pointing out. This is coming from a perspective of between the church and those who do not go to it. Basically, between those who have a faith and those who do not. There's a spiritual side of things that I believe is very important and predominant in one's life, if you choose to recognize it. We are physical beings, but there are some very clear evidence that there is a grand design out there that is worth pointing out. Alright, so moving on. Central theme, relationships. Relationships are a part of this life. They're a part of this world and everything in it. This goes above and beyond people. There's work relationships. There's relationships other animals have with each other. You can break it down and make it be as simple or as complex as you want. All the way, going all the way up to relationships and stuff like that. Relationships just dominate everything, unfortunately. And if it doesn't, either you're lucky or you're just trying to avoid it. I would also have to say you're skilled because you've picked up some things, whether through success or through failure, or through people who are wiser than yourself who pointed out some very concrete ideas and stuff that you have latched onto. How you relate to others to be interesting or because you're interested in yourself. You mentioned that before, and it intrigued me because from what I've studied, there are people who are in my family who are either narcissists or they have narcissistic tendencies. This is mostly unhealthy because of how you use other people and how you approach them, and people end up becoming like emotional batteries for you. Now, there's a way to make this this unhealthy habit be more healthy, and that's by simply it's like a circular process here. You're pulling attention off of others to yourself, and then you redirect it to where it needs to go. So, in a sense, if you find yourself always talking about yourself, always pointing at yourself, and basically everything is about me, 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 what you want to do to make this be somewhat healthy, more healthier, is by you just do that. You pull to yourself, you pull attention to yourself, and then you try to change the topic, change the focus to someone else, to something else. You ask them how your day is. You go try to involve yourself in someone else's life. This is important because this goes from being the focus on you to others that need the attention and the focus. There are those who struggle with, they have ADD or ADHD, so this will hit them a little bit differently, but still be important nevertheless. You're saying the videos are about you, and basically the relationship with you and others. It's a very good point, and everyone has a different perspective on this. However, I would have to say some are healthier than others, and you want to take some stuff with a grain of salt because this is all personal. There's a personal narrative and a personal spin on it, and it may not be in other people's lives. This is important, but not everyone can apply what you've said, unfortunately. It's just kind of the way it is. How we've grown up, who we've grown up with, and what we've grown up believing. All of this does matter to a point. Let's see here. Relationships. Is the problem really out there? If it's about control, if it's about some other internal stuff, no. The problem is going to be inside you. But there's others that you do not control or have anything over, that you do not have any say over. So with that in mind, especially in the work environment, there's a lot that simply you have no control over. You can probably talk to some other people, like your boss and all that, but outside of that, no. Internal problems and issues, if you're not going to look for them, you're not going to see them. You're just going to avoid them, miss them, or be ignorant to them, which is worse because no action's being taken, and sometimes it just gets worse. Kind of like letting crap and dust gather up in your car, like the windshield or whatever. If you don't clean it, if you don't take the time to look at it and to fix whatever issues are, it's just going to obscure the view, and it's going to look like it's just going to get in the way. That's just a really quick example. It is easier to focus on others because that's what many people, that's how they grew up. They grew up being told to focus on others because they themselves were not important. They themselves were either trash, unimportant, or just simply that other people, especially women, are the ones who you should focus on. For me personally, when I've tried to talk to other things of interest to me, and this is on multiple times over the past 20 years, I was repeatedly told by family members to focus on others, to ask them how their day was, and just simply to change the topic because, the theme, others matter. They're not wrong, but if it's always about them and never about yourself, it really becomes unhealthy, even if it's not wrong. I am keeping the moral aspect out of this out because this is not about what's right and what's wrong. This is about what is healthy, what is unhealthy, and what is healthier to choose. And you want to compare who you were to who you are now, and you can see a clear difference on how things are working and whether or not you should change it up. And if you're not looking, you should start looking because, again, relationships matter. And if you're letting anything get broken and stay broken, your life is just going to get worse. It's not going to get better. And it's not going to be enjoyable. Let's see, the relating factor. Generally, that's the relationship, but if you and this other person do not have a relationship, like say you're a coworker, or you're someone who met at church, or you're just someone who you happen to have been enemies with, like there are some high schoolers and there's people who they're still in school and they're watching these videos. So it doesn't apply to them because they don't work, they're in school. So for them, it would just be someone who's antagonistic to them, a bully or whatever. So for that, the relating factor would be what is between them, and it's not a relationship at all. You mentioned about control being avoided and you asked the question whether or not you should accept others. I would have to say this from my 10 years in the Army, as well as my job as private security. If you cannot trust others, try to trust the kind of person that they are. And if you can learn to identify the type of person, you can learn to identify what they're saying, how they're saying, what they are doing, and you can respond more effectively to that. So with that in mind, you can accept others, but you will have the tools to learn whether or not you should. Moving on. Your own psychology and ethics. I've thought about this for some, but honestly, for those who grew up in a Christian environment as myself, the answer basically becomes Christian culture and what is right and what is wrong. There's a moral spin on things, as well as an ethics that has to do about your faith, your belief, and your understanding of how, quote unquote, how God would view things. This is an interpretation as well as you hanging on to memories of your times with people that you trust, mainly your parents, but it could also be other people who are wiser and more mature, past mentors, or people like pastors and all that. This is important because sometimes the interpretation changes as well as your knowledge and understanding, it changes as well. You brought up sever past relationships. That is a very good point. I would have to say that if you have to sever relationships, go for it, because some have outlived their usefulness and some have just turned, for lack of a better word, sometimes they've turned rancid, they've turned unhealthy, it's time to cut loose because they're no longer in the picture, they're no longer in your life, and it is clearly time to move on, either for you or for them. In some cases, it's going to be both. Like, you're friends with someone else, but you both are at different stages of life, and so you're moving on. You may want to keep in contact with them, so, go check for an email address or something. Now, making men notice themselves and reminding them that they are an integral part of this society, as well as any relationships that they may have or will have, because some relationships are not guaranteed, but some are. Personal relationships like marriage and all that's not guaranteed, but relationships with coworkers, that is guaranteed, almost with a certainty. Everyone needs to make money to live, so with that in mind, you're going to have to learn to put up with people or with their bullshit. So, making men notice themselves. Not to the sense of where you have an unhealthy sense of pride, like, this is who I am, I'm the best, I'm the top. Nothing like that. But just, there are actions, there are things that you've said and done that no one else has or can do that. Being able to recognize your efforts and to take pride in that is important. Because if you don't, no one else will. That's what it comes down to. If you don't, no one else will. You're talking about, as far as another main point here, is have a relationship with your choices. I would spin that around and say, why not have a relationship with the consequences? And some of your responsibilities, you want to take that with a grain of salt there, because everyone has different responsibilities. If you have kids, your responsibilities are to your kids. If you have a spouse, it's to your spouse. If you have both, it's to both. Now, there are many who are driven to their work, so their relationship is tied strictly to their work. However, as I said, having a relationship with the consequences will make you think about whether or not this is smart, this is wrong, and whether or not there is healthier ways of taking care of this. 3 things you want to focus on there. Now, secondary relationship, you said, was basically women and going off to others. No disagreements or arguments for me there. Primary, you said, was ethics and psychology. I would just make it even more simple. Primary is to yourself and to how you look at life and whatever values and beliefs that you have. There are multiple points here, but if you narrow them down, you can figure out where you're coming from and where you're going to. Moving on. Most men don't realize unless they're sharpening themselves or if they're fighting. This is true, and this is why relationships are needed. Because introducing other points, other beliefs, and other factors that are important that you may not have taken into consideration can help improve you as a person and to fix whatever else in your life that needs to be fixed. Things don't need to be broken in order for them to be fixed, for you to need to be able to fix them. For example here, you may have a particular way of doing things, but it may not be wrong. It may be perfectly fine, but you could be missing out on something that could make it be more enjoyable. It could be as simple as making coffee. It could be as complex as, this is how you're treating a family member, and this is how you can treat it better. Like, you can do so with less confrontation, less issues. There's always a different approach. Sometimes they just have to be better than the one that you're currently using. Let's see here. If you can sharpen a man's reflection of himself, this will improve a lot of areas of your life. This is what, in response to you saying, with sharpening a man's reflection of himself in relationship to women. And this ties in. Okay, moving on to the next point, where you said most are lazy and try to scapegoat and avoid responsibility. Most people are brought up in a certain way, so they will deal with things a certain way that they have grown up believing or doing themselves. Taking responsibility is a hard thing to do, and frankly, there's really no payout, but there's no payout, there's no physical payout right then or there. Not to my understanding. I might be missing something, or there might be a little side point that is important. If so, I've forgotten it, and you could obviously remind me below in the comments section. But from my understanding, who you are now is how you grow up to be, and you can choose to take steps on a daily basis to try to work on that, to improve it, to fix your own shortcomings and issues so that you become a more healthy person. And by now, you've probably noticed me using healthy and unhealthy a lot. Frankly, rather than using right or wrong, better or worse, I like to say healthy or unhealthy because the whole point is to improve yourself. Is it takes the moral part of it outside and it makes it more understandable, excuse me. Not every person is a man or a woman of faith who has a belief that they hold on to. This is important because, as I've realized years ago, using a word that everyone can understand for important parts like this is very important. It's very crucial to be able to pass some of these points on to others clearly. All right. However, there's no disagreement from me there about most people being lazy. We want to take the easiest route in life. We want the best in life. But working for the best is hard. And frankly, there's a lot of people who just don't see the value in it. They don't understand why. Part of it has to do with simply having a life that you are satisfied of, being able to do something with yourself, your life in your hands, and be able to be proud of it. Part of it is a pride issue, a healthy pride issue, a sense of accomplishment. You are this kind of person, you're going this far in life. And frankly, being lazy goes against that. Being lazy actually kills up a lot of time, a lot of days. And it ties in with procrastination because guess what? There are things that you need to take care of that you're not taking care of. And you're just going to sit on them and focus on what you want to do, which is play video games, watch movies, or whatever. The scapegoating part is different because you're actively avoiding responsibility and you are actively pinning the blame on other people. Most of the time. That's what it is, what it seems to be with false allegations and about, I can't really speak for others, but what I've seen is I've been hit up with a false allegation and it rocked my world. I lost my job and I admit I struggled with being angry at that one woman and the other groups of women that were tied into it but with a separate situation. I would have to say that I had to take a few steps back so I could kind of refocus and reset myself. But, I took responsibility for my actions and I figured out how I could make this be better. Most people would rather just take the easy way out and either blame someone else or just straight up avoid any responsibility to what happened and what they did to make this happen. Being able to work around that or to fix it is honestly difficult. And outside of tragedy, outside of problems and stuff happening, I would just honestly let it go and not worry about it. I believe bad situations and trauma and all that can be a blessing because it knocks old habits out and it forces you to have to adjust. Yeah, it's painful. It's painful for a reason, and sometimes things happen and there's no explanation right there or then, but you will see it in a year or two or even a decade later in some of my cases, some of the problems in my life. I did not understand them then, but I understand them now, or at least better. I understand them better. Getting this point out though is a little bit hard because you're trying to I can't simply condense a lot of things into one or two sentences. Sometimes this is impossible to do in such a short amount of time. All right, moving on. I grew up with this as well here. This is a very good point. I'm a man and I can take it. In the Christian culture, this is interpreted a little bit differently, because men have a responsibility to be the leaders of the family. They have a responsibility because they're the ones who should have the responsibility because they're the ones who handle it correctly. That was a message that was passed down to me. It was something that I was learned. However, this takes a lot out of it that kind of bothers me. The fact is, you can't take shit, excuse the language, you can't take it unless you are equipped to handle it. That's why a lot of people say you have to get it together. You have to get your stuff together. If you're not getting your stuff together, if you don't have the training, you don't have the preparation, you don't have the tools, which is what I've been trying to do with my channel, is to give other people tools so they can work on this stuff. So they can be more efficient, they can be healthier, they can be a better version of themselves. So without the tools, you're not going anywhere. The proper tools. I would have to say, this is a side point here, but even if you don't have the proper tools, you can substitute until you get the proper tools. Sometimes the tools will not click after a certain amount of time or a certain amount of experiences that have happened. So the right situations, the right experiences can actually make things more understandable as time goes on. Let's see. Stop shaming and nagging yourself. Have a little pride in who you are as a person, as a man or a woman, or if you're struggling with your own identity, take time to stop and work through your identity on who you are and be situated in yourself so that you can have pride in what you've done, who you are, and the fact is, no one else could ever be like you. And frankly, they would fail if they tried. So, encouraging yourself and having self-pride, a healthy amount, is important. This is another important part here, this next topic. Women have moved on, men have not. Frankly, there's a lot that you can point at, not necessarily blame, but point at as far as contributing factors. Church, the way the country's running with the social culture and all that, the media, with people pushing ideas down other people's throats on how things should be done, and the fact that tradition is bad, which it's not. It's a way of doing things, and it's a very stable way, even if it is not the best way for you personally. Tradition is just a good route in general for you until you find your own way in life, your own method of doing things. So, women have moved on because there is a ton more available to them. There's more help, there's more protection, there's more tools. There's generally more people who will support them in one way or another. So there's a lot more out there for women than there is for men. For men, it's basically fathers, any type of mentor that happens to be on the scene, and whatever influences are in your life, good or bad. You know, could be cops, for example. There's a lot of people out there who they've had bad run-ins with law enforcement, so they view everyone there. And anyone who is in law enforcement, you can't get a word in edgewise because they're bad experience. That's just an example of something that could be useful, but is probably not useful. I'm just saying that there's things you should look at that are useful that go contrary to your own personal experience. Do not discredit them. They are still important. Alright. Everything is a relationship. That's another point that you made. I mentioned that previously. That's very important. Quality becomes important the more a relationship is being defined and is important. So the more a relationship is there, the more likely quality will become important. This is something new to me, but I would have to say, if you have a foundation that is already there, this is already important. If you do not have a foundation, what you've said below will become more important as time goes on, because it is a very solid truth. It is a very solid observation that impacts almost everyone, if not everyone. Moving on. You're the challenge and the adventure in your mind. And frankly, this applies most to women. Women and people who you care about. Frankly, if they don't understand you, they're going to stick around a lot longer until they do understand you. So, don't feel like you need to explain yourself. Let there be some mystery. Let there be something there for the other person to work on. In some cases, like myself, if I understand someone or something thoroughly, I'll move on because I'm bored. This is a personal issue. This is not a reflection on anyone or anything else. So when it comes down to it, I like to dig deep into things that I don't know that do interest me. So when I do know them and I understand them inside and out, not only do I know more about them, which is a good thing, but the bad thing is I have a tendency of moving on and leaving things behind. The things that I do know, I move on to something newer and better, more or less, or at least different. Anyway, these are my thoughts, and oh, okay, one last page here. Sorry. Let's see here. Relationships are always your choice on to participate in them. And frankly, that comment you meant about autopilot and whether or not you're happy or in a familiar place, you can make it be both. It will take some time and take some work, but you can make those both happen at the same time. The autopilot is a little bit tricky because, frankly, what you could be doing now could be wrong, or there could be better ways of doing it. So I would have to say just be careful of that, be wary, because you may have some unhealthy habits or some that are just straight up wrong. Or just you're doing things a way that cause problems because you are a person who likes conflict, you like drama. It could be something like that. Controlling yourself and not women. You can only control your own actions, thoughts, and your own words. You try to control anyone else's, you're going to fail. Control what you're able to, right? It's about you. This is your life. This is your responsibility. No one else can make your choices. They cannot live your life for you. This is important. This is not selfish. This is focused on yourself, on your responsibilities and what you have to do. You have to live this life. So from that angle, this is nothing wrong. This is not a selfish point of view. This is about you trying to manage your own life and be responsible for it. So anyone who wants to say anything negative or bad about you focusing on your life, you just want to point that out to them, that this is your life. No one else can handle it but you. And if you care, you're going to spend some time thinking about that. All right, I hope this was informative, and sorry for the long video. I try to go through this quickly as I can, as accurately as I'm able to.